I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
These days, you can't broach a subject without hearing someone say, I have a right to. Whether the subjects are mainstream, like healthcare, education, or abortion, or more axillary, like employment or access to exclusive venues and groups. But the fact of the matter is this. Our rights are enumerated, and we do not have rights that extend to everything within our purview. We have the right to freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and the petitioning of government, although some would argue that right was infringed upon during and after the events of January 6th for some. We have the right to keep and bear arms, to be protected against unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right to due process, as well as protection against self-incrimination and double jeopardy. We have the right to a speedy and public trial, an impartial jury, the right to confront witnesses, and the right to counsel, although, again, some would argue that those rights were usurped during and after the events of January 6th for some. And we have the right to exist outside the bonds of slavery and are guaranteed equal protection and due process under the law regardless of race, gender, or religion. Over the years, these enumerated rights have been extended to axillary but related issues and rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court, but nevertheless, these core rights belong to all men and women who are created equal in the eyes of our Creator. The 9th and 10th Amendments reserve to the states what is not specifically mentioned in the Bill of Rights and the amendments to the U.S. Constitution. One right not included in these enumerated rights is the right to a job in the federal government. This brings me to my point. The recent purging of Department of Justice federal prosecutors and the review of the employment of FBI agents who participated in the political persecution of the nonviolent January 6th protesters. As Victor Nava of the New York Post reported,
and the Justice Department fired dozens of federal prosecutors involved in January 6th cases on Friday and informed the FBI that it would initiate a review process to determine if thousands of agents that worked Capitol riot investigations should also be terminated. Interim D.C. U.S. Attorney Ed Martin told the 30 or so fired federal prosecutors that they were being removed as a direct result of their role in the prosecution of some of the more than 1,500 individuals who took part in the events at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. The Supreme Court ruled last June that the charge of obstructing an official proceeding of Congress, used on more than 300 riot defendants, was too broadly applied.
Now, we can have a frank discussion about January 6th, the constitutionality of the prosecution against these nonviolent attendees, and the tactics used to hunt these people down and hold them. I, personally, believe several constitutional rights were blatantly violated, including the right to redress government, the right against unreasonable searches and seizures, the right to due process, the right to a speedy and public trial, to an impartial jury, and the right to confront witnesses. Add to that the right to counsel. But that's not the point I want to highlight today. Today, I want to spotlight the pure, entitled narcissism of the federal employees affected by the Trump administration's move to terminate them for actions they should have refused to execute. Actions that were, and there's no other way to couch this, actions that were unlawfully ordered. In response to the announced investigations towards the terminations of the offending FBI agents, the labor union representing over 1,400 FBI agents responded with indignant outrage. Again, from the New York Post.
If true, these outrageous actions by acting officials are fundamentally at odds with the law enforcement objectives outlined by President Trump and his support for FBI agents. The FBI Agents Association said in a statement, dismissing potentially hundreds of agents would severely weaken the Bureau's ability to protect the country from national security and criminal threats. and will ultimately risk setting up the Bureau and its new leadership for failure, the union added. These actions also contradict the commitments that Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi and Director nominee Kash Patel made during their nomination hearings before the United States Senate. They also run counter to the commitment that Director nominee Patel made to the FBI Agents Association, where during our meeting he said that agents would be afforded appropriate process and review and not face retribution based solely on the cases to which they were assigned.
No federal employee has a right to their job. Each federal employee operating under the executive branch, as FBI agents and administrative staff do, serves at the pleasure of the President and can be dispatched from their station to any assignment commanded, even if that station and mission is to watch ice melt at the South Pole. This was evidenced in President Reagan's termination of unionized air traffic controllers in 1981. Further, and this is in direct response to the labor union spokesman's inference that the agents in question would be denied process and review. The agents in question are going through the process of review. If any agent is determined to have acted within the boundaries of the law, their jobs are safe. However, if any agent was found to have been fueled by politics or ideology in the execution of their duties, they should be, deservedly, terminated and restricted from federal employment going forward. An FBI agent's oath, like that of other federal law enforcement officers in the United States, is part of the oath required by law for all federal employees to support and defend the Constitution. Here's the oath that FBI agents take.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God.
This oath underscores the commitment of FBI agents to uphold the law, serve the nation, and protect its citizens while adhering to the constitutional principles of the United States. Those principles and that service, empowered by the U.S. Constitution as it pertains to the executive branch, have no exceptions for stepping outside their boundaries because a corrupt or politicized administrator or executive branch swamp creature wants to exact political persecution against perceived enemies. Regardless of any order, an FBI agent has a personal allegiance to his oath and doing what is right, legally and constitutionally. The American people voted a mandate to Donald Trump to effect radical change in the Washington, D.C. swamp. We're tired of the status quo bureaucratic bullshit that has morphed into a political apparatus that exerts complete centralized governmental control over our lives. There are too many authorities, too many regulatory agencies, and too many dictatorial bureaucratic powers that lord over our daily lives. This is the change we voted for. This is the change we expect. Make no mistake, the deep state will not go quietly. We're seeing that in the confirmation hearings where deep staters attempt to smear, discredit, and talk over the nominees, even as they insisted during the Obama era that an elected president deserves the cabinet of his or her choosing. We see it in big pharma campaign finance beneficiaries like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren attacking Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose goal is to remove chemicals from our food and reduce our population's dependence on pharmaceuticals. We see it in how viciously they stand to protect their corrupted status quo in the face of the nominations of Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard, two individuals who have not only proved their devotion to the Constitution and our nation, but who have taken a stand against the continuance of the deep state grift. And we see it in how almost immediately after recovering from the shock of getting their asses handed to them in a sweep of the 2024 general election, the far left and the caustic deep staters began their attacks on President Trump and started their quest to reclaim the narrative in the mainstream media. This is why I beg you to keep the pressure on. We can't let up. We must continue with the same energy that delivered the 2024 election cycle to us. And that means hounding our elected officials to heed the mandate. Heed the mandate. They need to know there will be career-ending consequences should they continue to ignore the will of the people. We're at a unique moment in American history. We must embrace it. And if that means taking time away from watching the latest episode of Bubblegum for the Mind on Showtime to maintain engagement in the governmental process, so be it. Sometimes, doing what's essential isn't doing what's most fun. Then, fun should be a perk of success, not apathy. When we return, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
A free and independent media is the backbone of our great republic. So, it's crucial to have media outlets that aren't influenced by big tech censorship or the leftist mainstream media complex. But that means supporting journalistic outlets that bring us the truth without spinning facts to push a narrative. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee once a month at Starbucks, you can support the free speech mission of undergroundusa.com, an independent, reader-supported, and sometimes irreverent podcast and publication that gives you the real story without the bias. Go to undergroundusa.com/UUSA. That's undergroundusa.com/UUSA to receive a 25% discount on an annual subscription, bringing every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact-checkers. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect our republic. Go out there and seek the truth, my friends. Subscribe to undergroundusa.com today.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, you know, Frank, of course, regardless of what Punxsutawney Phil said about winter, down in Panama, it's a little different because Secretary of State Marco Rubio was just there, and a lot happening in terms of what the Chinese government is doing in Panama with their Belt and Road Initiative. And it looks like there was some pretty good developments based on Marco Rubio's trip there.
Yeah, I'd say Panama not signing back up to renew the Chinese initiative was a victory. We don't want to see the Chinese influence growing, and if that sounds biased, too bad. The Chinese they use a bastardized version of capitalism. I call it commu-capitalism, that takes advantage of the inequities of communism and inserts them into capitalism, and they have been using that, the benefits of that, the money gleaned from that, to bribe their way into influence all around the world. And once they get a hold of a place, the first thing they do is create initiatives where the military gets to go in there. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to see them expand anything. As a matter of fact, I want to see them removed from the World Trade Organization. They never should have been a part in the first place, because countries that use slave labor shouldn't be a part of the World Trade Organization.
No kidding. But and that in and of itself, Frank, is a reason to be very wary and to deal with China from a position of power and strength, rather than what we've seen over the previous 4 years of just getting run over. But what the Chinese are doing is warfare by another means. I mean, if we could see troops massing on borders, that's one thing. And you say, oh, war could be imminent. But what China's doing with this Belt and Road Initiative, not all through Latin America, South America, and parts of Europe and other places, that's girding for some kind of influence in a time of war.
Well, you have to look at exactly what they're doing. And they've stated it over and over and over again, if you care to listen. They want China to be the preeminent power in the world. And they see it within reach, so everything they do goes towards that effort. And they're not stupid. They look at history, they see what works, and they use it. They're using the same economic warfare that we used with the Soviet Union, which brought the Soviet Union into non-existence. They're executing economic warfare, and they're doing it from this commun-capitalist style economy that they have. It's not a level playing field, and I don't care how much you like cheap stuff. When you end up, because of your lust and addiction to cheap stuff, being under the thumb of a tyrant, then what was the cheap stuff worth?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if you're going to the store and you see made in China, don't buy it. If you're on Amazon and you see made in China, don't buy it. That's how you can actually engage personally in this economic warfare that they're foisting upon the United States and the free world. Don't play the game. Don't use TikTok. Don't use DeepSeek. Don't buy made in China stuff. Does it cost a little bit more to do it, to buy stuff from other countries? And, oh my, God forbid, even the United States?
Mm-hmm.
It might, but I'm going to bet you dollars to donuts that it's better made, will last longer, and it's exactly what you want to buy instead of a piece of junk that's cheap. So you get what you pay for. And in this case, what you're paying for is freedom.
Well, and years ago, I haven't seen it in a long time. That's what I'm saying. Years ago, there was the made in, look for the made in the USA label, basically.
Yeah. And it was a Union commercial.
Yeah. Look for the Union label. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. Because it was made in the USA, and people on the right normally aren't real big fans of unions, but we live in a new age. The union workers came out dramatically for Donald Trump in the last election because they want change from the deep state connected status quo that's been selling the United States down the river. Their leadership, they've got to start voting those people out because they did what they always do, just poured money into the Democrat coffers, and they want the status quo. The status quo is killing the republic. But made in USA, I'd rather support a union worker, an American union worker, than support the Chinese Communist Party. It's that simple.
Exactly right. And of course, in no small measure, you talked about slave labor. That is a crime. It's just hard for us to wrap our heads around because it's always presented to us that China's this big economic power. They just really want to have trade, and so they'll never really attack anybody, because they don't want to lose the business. Do you think that's really true?
That's the stupidity of the globalists. That's the stupidity of the UN and the World Economic Forum. All they see are profits. They're not seeing down the line where those profits mean nothing when the totalitarian government that you've said, I want to be a part of, says your money's worth nothing.
Across the country on Sunday, there were people waving flags, Mexican flags, and they're protesting the deportations. Oh, my goodness. Again, pro-illegal immigration, I guess, pro-crime, pro-everything that's not working out too good. This is why Donald Trump has got so many fronts to fight on. It's not just, some people, they don't like the idea of, quote, mass deportations, but to go out into the streets and try to shut down freeways in different major cities around the country, for one thing, shows us who they are, I guess. Maybe that's the good part. But again, it's really hard to believe that that's kind of the world we really live in.
Well, a couple things come to mind, and one is rooted in history. The first thing that any totalitarian power does when they invade a country and establish dominance is to raise their flags. What did the Nazis do when they came during World War II, when they conquered villages or conquered countries? You saw the swastika everywhere. What did China do when China expanded? That you see their flag everywhere. So when you see people on our sovereign soil waving a flag of a different country, you got to kind of keep that in mind a little bit, especially when the argument of, well, this is a tacit invasion.
Mm-hmm.
We have Mexican nationals who are not supposed to be here. And I'm not just picking on Mexico. I'll go all the way down the line: Guatemala, El Salvador, Venezuela, all Colombia, all the way down. They're not supposed to be here. They broke the law to be here, who are waving their flags in celebration of being here illegally. And what they're taking, instead of our freedom in occupying our country, our freedom in occupying our country, are the resources that are taxpayer-based, making our country poorer for them being here. Now, I don't begrudge anybody wanting to have a better life, but there's a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to come and be an American and jump into the melting pot to become one of many, e pluribus unum, if you want to do that, come here legally. I'll embrace you with open arms. I'll celebrate you.
Well, sure.
I'll even celebrate your, the days that celebrate your nationality. You want to celebrate your heritage here, on a special day for your nation. Yeah, why not? It's good to celebrate your roots, but you don't stake the flag of conquest when you're here and your existence is illegal.
Right.
And
exactly.
that's the one thing that we've got to remember here. If you came here not through the system, you've already broken a law, and that makes you a criminal, not someone searching for a better life. Now, you talk about these people being able to get into the streets and do this. Someone's got to organize this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the last piece that I had up at Underground USA talked about the defunding of nonprofits and NGOs. We have been funding stupidity like this ever since before the Clinton era, by funding these nonprofits who get government grants for quote unquote educational purposes, or educating the public on these current events issues. So these people waving the flags is stopping the traffic and making you late for work and causing problems and keeping emergency responders away from where they need to be. You're funding that.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons Donald Trump is saying, let's hit the pause button on this free money thing and figure out what we should be funding and what we shouldn't be funding. I, for one, don't think that groups like this should be funded.
No, I agree. And even in Dallas, the rally there, the anti-ICE protest there, was called "Stop the Hate."
Of course.
It's funny in the sense that, but it's incredibly serious. But it's funny in that, these people really believe that deporting people who are here, especially criminal aliens or aliens that have committed terrible crimes in addition to crossing the border, that they to have them deported, that's somehow hateful. And again, this is just like part of the political phraseology that is designed to take you away from the actual truth of what's actually happening.
If the law hadn't been bastardized by identity politics, then it would be easy to say, if you break the law and commit a crime, especially a violent crime, you should be incarcerated. Period. Dot.
Mm-hmm.
All we're doing is saying, if you were here illegally and you committed a violent crime, you've got to go to prison, but we're going to send you back to your country so they can actually feel the burden of taking care of you in a corrective way. We don't want to have to flip that bill because you shouldn't have been here in the first place. And anybody having an issue with deporting violent, illegal immigrants is either a zealot on the issue, and I believe most of them are, or they've been brainwashed, or they're just plain stupid.
Yeah.
Because we got a boatload of stupid in the United States today.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying, Frank, the idea of the concept of conquest being applied here, but also then you've got the self-loathing of some people who I think have just gone down the wrong path. They've been, as you said, they've sort of been brainwashed in all of this, and they think the United States is bad, and anything that really tears it down, takes it down, replaces it somehow, that's a good thing because the United States is so terrible.
It's a very good thing they weren't born in eras past. The Romans would have had them beheaded immediately.
Yeah,
talking against a state like that. We have free speech here in the United States. You can say the stupidest things you want to, but there's consequences for your stupidity, and one of them is not being taken seriously. So, if you are weak-minded enough to just follow the sheep on a narrative that's being fed to you by people who are actively trying to degrade the freedoms in our country by diluting them with people who shouldn't be here and who are exhausting resources that taxpayers paid into a system that was supposed to serve them, what's wrong with you? Did you not pay attention in I Can Think class? Because when you think down the line on this, all you're doing is celebrating your own demise. And that's kind of stupid.
Yeah. I think it was Nancy Pelosi said, yeah, exactly. A long time ago, she said, well, we're all Americans or something to that effect. And I was thinking, no, that's not it.
We're not. If you're here illegally and your passport says Guatemala, you're Guatemalan. You're not an American until you put your hand up and swear an oath to the country saying you want to be an American, not an occupier. So repatriating, and that's what I'm going to call deportation, repatriating people who are illegally here is a good thing, not a cruel thing. And if their countries are so great that they could celebrate these countries in the street by waving their country's flag, then what the hell are they doing here in the first place?
That is a great question. And of course, they have their own reasons. They don't want to go back to such a place.
Oh, well, then I guess you want to be here legally, don't you?
Right. Exactly. But that has to do with assimilation and not making enclaves or balkanization, because that's also a tactic of the left, is to balkanize everybody to where everybody is in their own separate little camps. There's no unity for anything.
And they're doing that through identity politics, whether it's nationality, race, religion, gender, it doesn't matter. If they can slap a label on you to be able to divide, then when election time comes, it's easier to cobble together 51% of people who are disgruntled on any issue and say that's the only issue that matters.
What do you think about the tariffs being in place now? Donald Trump seems to believe that they're going to have the effect that he's looking for. But in the long run, obviously, it's all going to be presented that Donald Trump's triggering a trade war, and Mexico and Canada have no choice but to retaliate and all this kind of thing. But Trump actually, sometimes he's a few moves ahead, though, don't you think?
Did Trump start a trade war? Yeah, he did. Good. I'm glad.
Yeah, but they frame it as though Trump is crazy and he's disrupting everything, and why would he do this in the first place, kind of thing.
That's because they're ignorant to economics. Remember who you're listening to when you hear this is talking heads who get paid to sit in a chair and get makeup applied for 30 minutes before they get in front of a camera to vomit invective. So why would I listen to you? The tariffs, in the short term, you may see some repercussions. I mean, if you're in Canada today, you can't buy U.S. liquor products up there. They're off the shelves. We'll show those Americans. We're not going to let our people get drunk on your alcohol. I mean, really? Canada's GDP is like 2.9, I think, and ours is like 26.8. So who is it going to affect worse when you have a trade imbalance? And quite honestly, the tariffs levied against Mexico and Canada really aren't for economic disparity. even though there exists an economic disparity. It's because they facilitated the mass invasion into our country and the trafficking of fentanyl into our country, which has killed more people than all the wars of the 20th century, all the casualties, U.S. casualties, and all the wars in the 20th century combined. So why wouldn't you want to take action against that and exact some pain against governments who just didn't give a damn to stop that stuff in the first place? I don't care. You know, Canada wants back in. They want things to be nicey again. There are some conditions, people. Otherwise, we don't need to do business with you. We really don't. Mexico, we don't need to do business with you. There's no need there economically from our standpoint. Will it take a couple years to turn it around so people are buying made in America? So that our farmers can start exploding in their production? So that we can get chip factories back up to speed? Do you think the world really wants that? Because if we become the world's preeminent power economically again like we used to be, dominant and fierce, well, then we don't really need anybody, do we?
Right, exactly. And Frank, I'm so glad that you brought up fentanyl and emphasized its importance here. If this is something I think even President Trump sees and says something's got to be done about this, and this is quite a bold step to actually do that to be effective, because typically a government official might say, or any other president, let's say, would simply say, well, we're going to go talk to them about fentanyl, and there'll be a little meeting, and it'll be on the news, and they'll say, we're going to try and do more about fentanyl. And then that'll be the last we ever hear of it. This time, they actually have to do something about fentanyl.
In that scenario that you just mapped out, we say we'd like to cooperate and work with you in order to stop it on your side of the border, and we're handcuffed by what their limitations and their laws on their side. Meanwhile, in Mexico now, the cartels, which don't have a law, except for the law that they want to exact, which usually ends up being heads in bags, they're launching drones to come over into sovereign U.S. territory, and these drones are weaponized, targeting Border Patrol. So they're at war with us. Why shouldn't we be at war with them?
Right.
They should just be really damn happy that we're doing it economically, and we haven't decided enough is enough. This has to stop, and we're rolling in. And that wouldn't be an invasion. That would be a defensive operation, because they're already killing American citizens on U.S. soil through the advancement of fentanyl over the border.
Right. And the idea of establishing or designating, I should say, cartels as terrorist organizations, put them on the terrorist list. That's a big step in actually physically attacking them. There would be those, of course, who would say, well, you can't go into a sovereign country like Mexico to attack them. I mean, in other words, how would you navigate that?
How would you navigate it? We're going after criminals.
Right.
You know, and it hasn't stopped the UN before. The UN has sanctioned military operations in sovereign countries before. So are you telling me that if we bring up MS-13 on the floor of the United Nations, that these people are going to make the argument that these are it's just a gang of people getting together for recreational purposes, and we don't have to go after them. You can't do this. And is that what we're supposed to believe?
Right.
No, yeah. They're turning a blind eye to organizations that traffic in not only drugs like fentanyl, but are facilitating the advancement of terrorist organizations over the southern border. Add to that human trafficking.
Yeah.
So because there's not an outcry about this, and because governments like Mexico's government and other Latin American governments don't want to recognize that and cooperate in expunging these groups from within their borders, just tells me that they're complicit. So this socialist south of the border could say anything she wants about, we're going to do this with tariffs, and we're going to do that with tariffs, and we're not going to cooperate with this. Well, the criminals inside your country are fair game, just like ISIS is in Somalia.
So yeah, there is that parallel there. Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely, there's a parallel there. They're killing Americans. People need to let that sink in for a little bit. They're killing Americans on sovereign soil. And other governments are saying that we just have to eat it and smile. And they don't want to be punished for allowing that to happen. No. If you're complicit, you've got to pay a price. And if you're the government that's complicit in it, your people are going to feel the pain because you're an irresponsible government. Not the Canadian people or the Mexican people that we're upset with. It's the governments of these countries that are irresponsible and haven't taken it upon themselves to enact the laws of their land to keep criminal organizations from within their borders committing acts of war in other sovereign nations.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the big differences now, Frank, is that, as we're talking about this, if we had a different administration or the same administration that we just had, or a Kamala Harris administration, God forbid, right, we would just be talking about it. But we're actually talking about it now in a context where the administration that is now in the White House, the Trump administration, takes this very seriously. And I think the cartels really do think that something is going to happen rather than just nothing.
I'll take it a step further. If we didn't have the current administration, and God forbid Kamala Harris would have won or other ideologues on the left would have won the presidency, we'd be facilitating lighting for the underground tunnels so that they could expedite the invasion of our country and the facilitation of illegal narcotics that's killing our kids. Because that's basically what they did. Come on over. We're not going to stop you. Come on over. If peppered amongst you who want to have a better life happen to be human and drug traffickers, well, that's just the price of doing business. No, it's not. And we do not have to put up with it.
No, you're right about that. And basically, talk about being complicit. I mean, they don't care about the people in the United States, Frank. I'm almost convinced of that at this point.
These people only understand maintaining and acquiring power. It's just like the left in our country.
Yep.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Wokeism is a threat to the very foundations of our great nation and to the very principles of liberty and justice. The goal of wokeism is to divide us, pitting Americans against one another based on race, gender, and identity. This ideology undermines free speech and open dialogue, which are the bedrock of our republic. It promotes censorship and cancels anyone who dares to challenge its extreme agenda. We must stand against this cultural Marxism and protect our constitutional rights. Say no to wokeism.
Don't let biased algorithms or degree screens or exclusive professional networks or stereotypes. Don't let anything keep you from discovering the half of the workforce who are stars. Workers skilled through alternative routes rather than a bachelor's degree. It's time to tear the paper ceiling and see the stars beyond it. Find out how you can make stars part of your talent strategy at tearthepaperceiling.org. Brought to you by Opportunity at Work and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Before we go, a few words on the dismal report on the state of our K-12 education performance, especially where literacy and specifically reading are concerned. Tommy Schultz of the New York Post reports.
The latest scores from National Assessment of Educational Progress are unsurprisingly catastrophic. A generation of painfully slow progress was swiftly wiped out, and reading scores for our lowest performing students fell to the lowest levels in the NAEP assessment's 30-year history, despite an additional $190 billion from the federal government for K-12 in the last few years, on top of its usual massive outlays.
In 2023, the total spending on K-12 education in the United States was reported to be approximately $857 billion from all sources, federal, state, and local. So only a fool would continue to believe that funding is the problem where the decline in American education quality is concerned. K-12 education expenditures break down thusly. Administrative salaries, 7.5%. Teacher salaries, 42.4%. And employee benefits, 37.6%. The average K-12 teacher, and I'm not saying they don't earn it, they do, especially with the intellectual handcuffs they're made to wear by administrative and union edict. The average K-12 teacher makes approximately $66,397 in salary and $19,919 in benefits annually, totaling approximately $86,316 a year. The average K-12 administrator makes approximately $116,474 in salary and another $101,186 in benefits, totaling $200,017,660 a year on average. As an aside, and as an example, the annual budget for the Chicago public school system for the fiscal year 2025 is approximately $9.9 billion. For the 2023-2024 school year, the portion of the budget allocated to administrative costs was approximately $495 million. The Chicago Public School administrative offices employ approximately 4,200 employees. That's not counting teachers. This is where we should start if we're looking at where to make budgetary cuts based on eliminating waste, bureaucracy, and inefficiency. So compensation is not the problem at all. The problem is with the quality of the curriculum. Our society has abandoned critical thinking skills, which teach children how to think and make decisions for themselves. Instead, our schools have become the playground for neo-Marxist indoctrinators, and our children are the lab monkeys. If we're going to survive as a society, as a culture, and as a country, we must cleave the teachers' unions from any and all decision-making processes where curriculum is concerned. Further, we must cleanse the colleges of education of the far-left transformative neo-Bolshevik ideologies so pervasive in those institutions. Education has to be about the core subjects: reading, writing, math, science, and core civics and history, devoid of socio-political ideology. Critical thinking skills must be the order of the day. Social engineering indoctrination through our education system should be considered a criminal act of child abuse.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The foundation of our great nation lies in our unwavering commitment to freedom, and at its core is the principle of free speech. It's not just a right, but a duty to speak our minds, respectfully debate, and challenge ideas. Today, free speech is under attack by the forces of the deep state and the globalists. We must all do our part to protect free speech, for without it, we'd be lost in a sea of woke conformity and censorship. We have the right. Protect it.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, can potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
If you like the podcast, please head on over to undergroundusa.com and sign up for our Substack. It brings every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and the fact-checkers. And remember, talk politics, current events, and religion with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we understand we have more in common than we do in difference. We find that common ground. We achieve e pluribus unum, And we frustrate the dividers, the balkanizers of the deep state. And that's something we have to do going forward if we want the republic to survive. The deep state must be destroyed, and government must begin once again to serve the people instead of the special interests and the connected. Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeism. My name is Frank Salvato.